Welcome to More Than a Conversation, the podcast where we meet and have discussions with some of the most interesting people and innovative leaders in their fields from all walks of life. We will be discussing everything from politics to theology to religion to philosophy to life. Every once in a while, I may just be on here talking about whatever's in the news and whatever I think will be of interest to you. This is your host, Patrick Conley, and I hope that today will be more than a conversation for you. Welcome to More Than a Conversation. This is your host, Patrick Conley. And once again, today we have another incredible guest. I am joined today by Dr. Fred Garmon. Dr. Garmon is the president and founder of LeaderLabs, which is a leadership organization that trains leaders literally all around the world. But he has an incredible story that has brought him to this point. He's also the author of a book that we're going to be talking about today called Lucky Number 8. And maybe by the end of the conversation, you'll know a little bit more about what that means. But I think you're going to learn a lot more about him today as well. He has a plethora of stories and experiences that he's going to be sharing, some of them with us today. He has also served around the world in various ministry capacities, was a pastor for several decades, and we are just honored to have him with us today. Dr. Garmon, thank you so much for joining us on More Than a Conversation today.
Good to be with you, Patrick. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I am excited about getting into talking to you about your story. And part of what so excites me about talking to you about your story is how incredible it is knowing what I know about you and having seen the impact that you have made, all the things you have going on, all the things you've put your hands in, and then to hear the Fred Garmon story is absolutely incredible. Now, you are leading LeaderLabs. You are going around literally the world, training leaders everywhere. You've pastored, you've been at the top of leadership in your denominational circles, in world missions, and so on and so forth, have done incredible things. But one of the things we love to do on More Than a Conversation is when someone comes on, we like to get to know you. I like to introduce you to the audience. In the Marvel universe, they have the origin stories. And so we like to start out and say, hey, what's the origin story of Fred Garmon? Now, you're a native Carolinian, is that right?
That is correct. Spent the greater portion of my early life in Charlotte, North Carolina, almost in center of downtown now, but Charlotte has grown. Yes, sir. Then moved to, later on in the teen years, moved to Kannapolis, North Carolina, where I entered into high school up there. So yeah, that area of North Carolina, I'm a Tar Heel, brother.
Runs deep in your blood, even though it's been some years since you lived here. I know you've had family in the region and so on and so forth. Now, we see this picture, okay? We see the picture of Fred Garmon. We see the guy who's got it together. In fact, you would be comparable to many. They would compare you to a John Maxwell, somebody who's telling leaders how to lead. But somewhere you got your start, and I'm imagining that 7-year-old Fred Garmon probably wasn't telling leaders how to lead, but tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
You know, you've heard the old colloquial wives' tale, if you will, that says never judge a book by its cover. And I think just even the way you've introduced me makes me wonder a little bit about who you're talking about, because unless I hadn't wrote that book to remind me. Because, I've learned through the years of traveling around the world now and getting the opportunity to meet leaders from around the world and teaching leadership and to leaders from 42 countries now. I've got a good perspective of what's out there. And the one thing that you never do is judge a book by its cover. I did that early on. But the more that I got into conversation with leaders from literally around the world, I found out that everyone has a story. Everyone has an origin. And by the way, I like the Marvel comic metaphor there. In fact, right here in my office where I'm talking now, is the original Captain America shield hanging right behind me on the wall, just for
Wow.
your information. And yes, it is the original. I'm going to say that, and somebody can just prove me wrong, but I like to think it is anyway, Patrick.
Absolutely.
You never judge a book by its cover. Everybody has a story, and the more that I get to know people, it seems that there is this characteristic of resiliency and of perseverance from a biblical standpoint that causes a person to break the gravity of whatever dysfunctions or addictions that they may have had early in life. And when that happens, oftentimes they have another characteristic, and that is the characteristic of gratitude. They want to give back. They want to make a difference. They want to help others break the gravity of those same dysfunctions. And that's really what happened in my life. And the book, Lucky Number 8, tells that story in detail. And it's me looking back from like 60 years, looking back on my life at all of that dysfunction and all of that pain and all that heartache and all that misfortune, if you will. But it also looks through the lens of where I am today and says, this is what happened, and this is how I believe I broke free from that. So I think it's a good, inspirational, encouraging, and even challenging story. I know it has been all of that, just for me personally. In fact, that's the lens that I work from, that I created LeaderLabs, developing the leader in you. It's the very foundation of how I created that, because people ask me, sometimes, Patrick, they say, you have a PhD in organizational leadership. What did you learn? What's the number one thing you learned? And it's easy. For me, I learned that there are a lot of smart people in the world, and I'm not one of them. And that's no false rhetoric. That's not a play on words. I'm just a regular guy with a not so regular upbringing, really, a really dysfunctional upbringing early in my life. And God was gracious enough in his mercy and his grace to see potential in me, as he does in all of us, and to call me out of that and to enable me to come out of that. And it was looking at that grace and holding on to that grace. I like to call it this way: sabotaged to fail, but grace enough to succeed. And I think every one of us are sabotaged to fail. The enemy of this world, the enemy of our soul, wants to destroy us, wants to sabotage us and keep us from reaching our potential, whereas God wants us to see our potential. He wants us to meet and exceed, to be overachievers. I believe that. Scripture says that eye hath not seen, ear hath not heard, nor has it even entered the heart of a man or a woman what God has prepared for those who love him. And so it really hadn't even entered our imagination what God wants to do through us if we make the choices that will tap into his grace. And thank God I've made some of those choices. Early on, I made some really poor choices, but they were choices for survival. I didn't know there was another way. Living there in the inner city of Charlotte, growing up early, I was a 9-year-old boy, and I woke up one night around midnight. Police were running everywhere in my house. It was chaos. My mother was crying. The police had my father questioning him. And I found out that my 18-year-old sister had been shot and killed in my front yard. That began a downward spiral for not just me, but really for our entire family.
So how was your family prior to that event? I know your story seems to take a turn right there with the story of your sister. How would you have described your family before this moment? Was there chaos? I mean, was it the kind of family you would have expected someone to have tragically been shot in? I mean, I know you don't expect that in any family, but some families are more prone to that. Or would you have described your family as just a typical upbringing?
Typical, but not so typical. We were typical in the subculture that we were in. You know, cultures have nested subcultures within cultures, and we lived there, what I would call now the inner city. I was the baby of 8, so we had large family. There were 10 of us, counting mom and dad at that time. My dad had a 3rd grade education and was a brick block mason. And my 2 brothers had learned that trade and were doing that. They were much older than me. In fact, I had nephews and nieces who were older than me. They were already born. I grew up with nephews and nieces, not my brothers and sisters. Probably in this day and time, I would have never been born, to be honest with you. You know, being the 8th child, you don't hear that much anymore. It's an anomaly. Born 9 years after my sister. But we were typical, I think, in the sense that we were very poor. Now, Daddy did okay. He built our house, a 6-room block home that all of us had lived in at one time. Everybody was just piled in on everybody, and then along came Freddie, as I was called then. And so my sisters basically raised me, helped mom raise me. But we were poor, Patrick. But here's what I say, typical, because poor people hang out and run with poor people. That's their subculture. So they really don't know they're poor. It's kind of relative.
Sure.
You know, when later on in life, when I would start bumping into people outside of my subculture who had something, who looked like something, who had some ambition, that was strange to me. I remember the first time. So we were typical. I think we were close. Our family was close. Sunday afternoons were everybody come to our house because my mom was the oak tree of the family. But what really turned us topsy-turvy was not only losing the 18-year-old sister. 5 months later, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and 3 months later, she died.
Wow.
And so that really put the family in a tailspin. And my dad, who loved her dearly, and, you know, wasn't a Christian. None of my family at that time were Christians. My mother was a believer, but had gotten off track into what I now know to be a cult. So she was into an extremist situation. Part of the reason why she ended up dying, because she wouldn't go to a doctor. And I won't go down that path, but you'll have to get the book to read some of that. But Daddy started drowning his grief, you know, into a wine bottle. Anything that could just numb the pain. I was left there with Daddy at home. So it was just the 2 of us. I can remember him crying himself to sleep at night, drunk, you know, trying to drown the pain. And so a 9-year-old boy had to learn to take care of himself. It's interesting what the mind will do to protect us when we're young or when we're going through such painful things. I don't remember my 4th and 5th grade years, Patrick. They're gone. And the only thing that I can say about that, after reading and studying and looking back on it, is that I shut that out. It hurt so bad. And I was in such a vortex of just psychic agony as a young boy, that I just shut it out. But evidently during those days, I functioned to some degree. I continued to go to school, continued to do whatever normal life looked like.
You existed,
Yeah,
at least.
I just existed. But when I came to myself, you know, sometime around, you know, late 5th grade, early 6th grade, you know, I had found a different subculture in and of itself. I had found a street gang. I had found people on the street who had learned to survive the best way they could too. They became my family, more so than my nuclear family. They became my family. And so smoking cigarettes became the gateway to everything else. At 9, I guess 10 or 11, I was smoking cigarettes at home around everybody. Nobody cared. That was just part of our culture too. So I say typical, but a lot of people listening to this wouldn't say, well, that's not typical. Well, you don't know some subcultures then, because
Sure.
some subcultures are pretty dysfunctional that way. But I was smoking, around 10 or 11 years old, and drinking beer and whiskey, around that time, which in the street gang I was in, that led to smoking pot initially, which became a gateway to other drugs, psychedelics and mescaline and purple haze and acid and, mushrooms, and you think of it, heroin, everything, which then led to selling. And by the time I was 13, 14 years old, I was selling drugs pretty heavily. And then when we moved to Kannapolis, I think my dad, my sister, who I was living with at that time, thought that we moved out into a street, a dirt road in a single wide mobile home on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. You're talking country. In fact, the name of the road was Earnhardt Lake Road. We were right there where Dale Earnhardt is, and we lived on that road out in the middle of nowhere. But they thought that maybe that would curb my appetite for crime and dysfunction and drugs. By this time, my hair was way past my shoulders. I had pierced my ears. I had done some dumb stuff. I mean, some really dumb stuff. But in high school, I got arrested several times for dealing drugs. And the third time, they come and got me out of my art class at high school in the 10th grade. And long story short was they kicked me out of the state of North Carolina and sent me away for a year. And so I was gone a year. And again, they thought that this would rehabilitate me. They were hoping. It didn't.
So what do you think? What do you think? You're in that subculture. And one thing I want to point out quickly is, for those of you that are regular listeners, we've encountered a very similar subculture in the Quantel Lindsay episode, where he talked about selling drugs at a very young age, the interactions with the police at very young ages, and so on and so forth. And we're seeing those in different cities. We're seeing them in different ethnicities, and we're seeing them in different decades, but we're still seeing that there is a vast variety of cultures and subcultures, even within a state, even within your city, even within 50 miles of your home. There are people within 5 miles of your home, probably within 3. There are people that are living a vastly different life than you are. So I want to point out that the importance of us understanding the lens that you see life through is not the same lens that everyone else sees life through. That being said, Dr. Garmon, you're talking about you're dealing with substances, you're doing things, and what decade was this that this is happening?
This was the 1970s.
So you're in the 70s. So psychedelics are everywhere. You've mentioned some of that. Something's happening. Obviously, Dad is self-medicating. You're in this subculture, but do you think that there was some motivation other than your peers are doing it? Do you think that there's something about that, the events of mom and sister? Is there something you're looking for, or are you just going through the flow? What do you think is the motivator that's got young Fred Garmon on that path?
Survival, absolute survival. It was about security. And interestingly enough, and the book tells about this, the number one issue in my life, even to this day, has to do with security. That little boy, and I tell people now, even in the labs and in the book, Patrick, that every one of us has a little boy and a little girl inside of us. We always will. And we're always trying to protect that little boy and that little girl. And that little boy was, in fact, I can't even now, as a mature, hopefully a mature adult, I can't look back on that little Freddie and really get a grasp on just how bad he was hurt. It was beyond anything I can imagine what really happened to him, and I probably don't even want to imagine. That's why I shut it out. But it was security, Patrick. It was security. I had security up until that January and that June and July of those years when I was 9 years old. But then all of a sudden, in one 5 months failed swoop, boom, it all went away, and I became insecure. Totally. I was on my own. My sisters and brothers, many of them, until they read the book, didn't realize, because they had their own lives. They were going on with their own children, their own lives, and they had no clue. My sister, after reading the book, the only sister that's still alive, by the way, there's only 2 of us out of 10 that are left. She read the book and she said, Freddie, she said, I'm heartbroken that I didn't help you, that I didn't see what you were going through. So it was security, and I've always had to struggle with insecurity. And maybe that's my thorn in the flesh. I've asked God to help me to take it away. And there have been developments, of course, and God's grace and my confidence, but it keeps my confidence in Him, Patrick. I know I'm a turtle on a post. I didn't get here on my own. If God had not intervened and allowed me to be pulled out by His grace and His mercy, I would still be there. So it was insecurity and security.
So for the people that, and I guess all of us, and you've talked about it, I've heard you mention it in the lab. We all have that little boy, that little girl, that person inside that we're trying to deal with. And I think to hear someone with multiple degrees who has led NGOs on the other side of the world, who has done these incredible things, for you to say that my life has been impacted in ways by the person inside of me. And I know that obviously in all of your education and the work you've done, you've seen that explored in depth. Right now we're dealing with a lot of people that are having security yanked away from them through COVID, through the things that have happened over the last few years, through economic troubles and all those things. And for some of them, they may not be recognizing that the anxiety they feel now is a result of maybe something that made them feel insecure in the past, or there may be somebody who's having those life-changing events and it's affecting them in the future. So I'm interested, when I talk to you, do you feel like that today, that little Freddie, for lack of a better way of putting it, is still affecting you and he's still there? And if so, where do you see that show up?
Oh, most definitely. And whether we want to admit it or not, I think that it does with all of us. And that again is, I think, the fact that one of my characteristics is I'd like to think I'm transparent, I'm vulnerable. I have found that one of the keys to helping people grow, mature, develop, become the best version of themselves is to be open about your own shortcomings. And very few people will be. Some people would say, and give you the advice, don't say that about yourself. Don't tell people that. And I'm just the opposite. I want people to know that I've been able to deal with the little Freddie that was hurt so bad. he was a good guy. He is a good guy. He wasn't a bad guy at heart. And to answer one of your questions as you were talking there, a lot of the reason that I was in that culture, and it was about survival at its very core. Yes, just about existing, getting by. I slept in ditches at night to not have to go home because I didn't want to be there with the winos and the drunks. I slept in abandoned, apartments, cold, freezing, thinking I was going to die sometimes. It was so cold. I can feel it now. It's an unbelievable background. But that little boy, has grown and matured too. He has grown. He has matured. He has come of age. He has learned to deal with his night terrors. Literally, he has learned to deal with some of those insecurities. And one of the ways that he learned, it doesn't get away from the pain, doesn't get away from what happened. That is always a scar, that is always a hot button, which is always a trigger, right? You touch him and you'll know it pretty quick. But that's been something I've had to deal with as well. And I think everybody does. We all have triggers. We all have hot buttons. We all have things in our past. Just most people don't ever deal with them. Most people do not ever even acknowledge these things. Therefore, they keep going around that mountain over and over and over, trying to deal with the dysfunction, and it never getting better. You have to acknowledge. Sometimes the way you see the problem is the problem. In fact, that you don't even see the problem. You don't see that you're the problem. You don't see that the little girl or the little boy inside of you is the problem. But I believe that God wants to heal all that God wants to bring us out of all that. I think I'm an example of it. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. There are times that little Freddie still shows his pain and his hurt. But what God did for me, when I gave my heart to him, and that was the real turnaround, Patrick, was when I went down to that altar on that Sunday morning in 1974 and did what I didn't know what I was doing, but said yes to Jesus publicly. And I mean, I was radically changed. Radically changed. I mean, I can't tell you, I can't describe to you how radical it was. It for me. Now, I've talked to so many people. Not everybody's experience is like mine, but for me, it was an Apostle Paul knock you off your horse, light shining. I mean, one of those moments to where I was a tough guy. I was a good guy, but I was a tough guy. I didn't cry. I would say, hit me again. And I'm 16, 17. Hit me again. And then I'd come after you. Literally. You can't hurt me. You better knock me out or kill me because I'm coming after you. So I didn't cry. Sure. You just didn't cry. But on that Sunday morning, I was crying like a baby because something radical was happening. That night spoke my first message. Never before had talked in front of a group. Had gone and got my hair all cut off that afternoon. My daddy never moved that fast in his life when I told him when I got home after church, I want to go get my hair cut. And by that time, he had stopped drinking, but, he still didn't know the Lord, but he had stopped drinking, and we were living out there in the country on that dirt road in that single-wide mobile home.
Hey, More Than a Conversation listeners, I hope that you are enjoying this conversation as much as I am, and I hope that you're getting something great out of it today. I'm just wanting to jump in here in the middle to take a moment and let you know a few ways that you can help out More Than a Conversation. First, wherever you're listening, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. That will definitely help, and that'll make sure that you get all the content. Also, if you have a way to rate, if your app allows you to give a 4-star, 5-star, whatever the rating is that's the top rating, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and drop a rating there. That's how the aggregators and the distributors rank podcasts, and the higher the ranking you give, the more ears will be able to hear these great conversations. Thanks again, and I'm hoping that today has been more than a conversation for you. Now let's get back to it.
And then going back to school the next morning, after talking in church that night, testifying, didn't know what I was doing, behind the pulpit for 15 minutes about what Jesus did for me that morning. And then on Monday in school, inviting everybody to come to church that Monday night and see what God had done for me. And 70 young people showed up that Monday night
Wow.
to hear. And for the next 8 to 12 weeks, what was it? 10 to 12 weeks, I forget now. We had revival on Monday nights. And that began just a total transformation. But what happened was a couple things. I was pulled out of one subculture and brought into another culture, which was that church culture. I didn't know people dressed like that, drove cars like that, acted like that toward one another. I didn't know people made that kind of money. I mean, it was like, golly, we live in multiple universes, but people just don't realize it.
Yeah.
We live in silos that we don't realize about other cultures, and subcultures that are all around us. But that helped. But I'll tell you one of the greatest lessons that I had to learn early as a Christian, because I tried to walk with both feet in both camps for a while. I tried to hold on to my old friends, and I was trying to change my life. And one of the hardest lessons for me to learn was that I wasn't strong enough to not give in to the temptations of my former life. I had to cut off everything that pertained to my former life, or I kept falling. I'd go out with them and come back home and kneel down beside my bed in that single wide mobile home and cry like a baby, asking God, begging God to forgive me for having smoked dope again that night, or, cursed again, or done something bad. Until finally it dawned on me, you can't help them and they can't help you. And I was lonely for a long time as a young Christian. But I got involved in sports, lettered in 3 sports my senior year in high school. I started studying a little bit better, became the first person in my entire family to graduate from high school. So I had to change my focus. I had to make up my mind that I was going to change, and that I believed that God would help me change. And so as I began to discipline myself and take advantage of the Holy Spirit's work in my life of self-control, self-discipline, perseverance, and of just self-efficacy, just believing that if I wanted this, I had to go after it. So graduated from high school, ended up going to Lee University, got into Lee University by getting in, on probation, because my high school scores they just let me graduate from high school to get me out. They were afraid I'd revert back. And so they just wanted to get me out of there, I think. And so I got a 1.7 my first semester at Lee University, and they still kept me for some reason. And I ended up graduating in 4.5 years, debt-free, Patrick.
Wow.
I worked 3 jobs, preaching on weekends, worked at a spa, was painting homes, working in a janitorial service, and washing dishes in the cafeteria at Lee, and putting every dime of it toward my school bill, because I didn't have any help. No, there was not anybody there. And I was bound and determined I wasn't going to have this big debt. Graduated debt-free. Now, you have to get the book, because miracle after miracle. I was preaching in churches, did things for me. The saints of God, old ladies from Foursquare churches right there in Charlotte, right outside there in Hickory, had a yard sale for me one year, and a miracle $700 something came in that helped me to take exams one year. I mean, God showed up. He just showed up, and ended up pastoring, as you've said, for over 3 decades in the Church of God. Left there to work as a missionary in Southeast Asia as the executive director of a humanitarian organization called People for Care and Learning. Good Lord, look at my background. And then now I find myself on the other side of the world, working in Cambodia and working in Vietnam and Laos and Bangkok, Thailand, and Sri Lanka and all these places, and saying, how in the world is this happening? But we ended up doing some pretty incredible things. with People for Care and Learning, even building a city for the poor there in Phnom Penh. And it was just, it was a radical superintendent of Southeast Asia for the Churches of God for 5 or 6 of those years. So the opportunity to see the world, to see the Buddhist Hindu world, to be able, and you see how I think my background, being the director of several orphanages where kids didn't have a family and that were living in dysfunction. And I can see where all of that stuff in my background now is part of the reason why those drivers were in my life. Those opportunities, you choose certain opportunities that come your way and you choose not to go. But all the things that came my way that I chose, that God led me down, had to do with passions, had to do with hurts and pains that I felt like that I could speak into and help people with. And then, just 5 years ago, felt like it was time to walk away from People for Care and Learning and to use, the Master of Divinity that I got, the PhD in leadership that I got. I just felt like, gosh, all this stuff has helped me. What did I learn? Remember, I learned I'm not a smart person. And all the things in my life really had more to do with me learning how to deal with my not knowing than anything else.
Sure.
I had to learn how to learn. And so I'm the last person on earth you would think would be teaching leadership or would be helping see people over in Southeast Asia. But at this stage in my life, I'm 63 now, and what's important to me is to pass on anything and everything that I can from my life experiences. And what people choose to do with the information is up to them. It's about self-efficacy and it's about personal agency. They have to make the choice. I earned, as I've said, 3 university degrees. What did you learn? That I don't know much relative to what I need to know. I am
Absolutely.
a lifelong learner. I am continuing to learn. I just got 4 different certifications in the last 3 months and just finished one last night, which was one of the most difficult exams, 4 hours I've ever gone through yesterday, because I want to grow, I want to learn, and I want to be able to coach, mentor, help other people to become the best versions of themselves. And really what I'm passing on to people are just smart ways of handling things. I call them shortcuts, life hacks. And they all have to do with life. They work if you're pastoring, if you're running a business, if you're a youth director, if you want to learn to ski, parent, whatever. These life hacks, they work. And so I use principles that I've learned from my own lifetime. And a lot of them I learned because I made a lot of mistakes. And I want to stop and help people from making those same mistakes. And I believe that I can do that.
And you mentioned, you talk about life hacks, and one of the things you've talked about is personal agency. And I'm interested in, you came from such a background that was plunged into dysfunction. And obviously there has been success. And I think you have a unique view. A lot of people have difficulty looking into, well, I guess most people have difficulty looking into any other culture, but we also have an idea of what success looks like. We have an idea of what right looks like. And so I think sometimes it's easier for someone who comes from a subculture that is not considered the picture of success to understand when they look into another subculture, this is the way that, society has deemed success looks or whatever. But sometimes people who maybe didn't come out of that difficult subculture, didn't come from that hard place, have difficulty looking back and seeing what needs to be done, seeing how things can be helped. And no doubt that had a lot to do with stirring your heart, helping you to reach people, helping you with the work you did in Cambodia and other places, and even pastoring. But how do you connect personal agency? So the person that's out there and going, all right, I've listened to this guy tell this story, but he's an anomaly. He is the lucky number 8 that his book title says. He got lucky. He got all the breaks, whatever. What do you say, though, to the person who is maybe listening to this podcast that's life is still in dysfunction, is not where they want to be, things aren't going well, they're frustrated, whatever. Does personal agency work for all of them? Is that really the first step to changing things?
Yeah, I think that everyone, what we know from Psychology 101, Patrick, is that every person has a certain amount, or should have a certain amount, of personal agency. The desire, the ability, the grit to say, I want this, and to go after it. And obviously, some people, have more than others. But I believe that this is what really happened, what happens at the new birth. That's the only way, because I didn't have it really before the new birth. It was there that Sunday in 1974, January of 1974, that I started discovering personal agency. And as time has gone on, I begin to understand and become very intentional about the choices that I make and the decisions that I make, and of not procrastinating. See, a person without personal agency will keep saying, tomorrow I'll do this, tomorrow I'll do that. But personal agency helps you to say, no, I'm going to do it today. But it also helps you to abandon certain things. It helps you to say, that's not good for me. That making that choice, hanging out with those people, with that person, doing this particular thing, those behaviors, those have got to stop. So it's about abandoning and saying no to some things and learning to say yes to other things. And I believe that that's where the Holy Spirit comes in. I'm not sure I would have ever done it. Well, I don't think I could have done it without the help of the Holy Spirit. And it was there at the new birth that God planted a seed of potential. G. Campbell Morgan, a great preacher, said that at the new birth, God plants in the heart of every new Christian a seed of potential. And I believe potential and personal agencies in every person born into the world. God just did it. But when a person accepts Jesus, I call it personal agency and potential on steroids. But you still have to make the choice. God, remember, Jesus stands at the door and knocks. He don't bust it down. And you have to say yes. It's about choice. Good news and bad news. Bad news is you've made the choices that have gotten you to where you are in life today. The good news is you've made the choices that have gotten you to where you are in life today. You've got to start making different choices. You've got to change your behavior. You've got to change your want to. And if you want it bad enough, and if you'll take the hand of Jesus, open that door and say yes to Jesus, then you will understand what potential on steroids looks like.
Ultimately, it sounds like a person has to reach the point. When we say personal agency, what we mean is you have authority to make decisions that have impact upon your life. In theological terms, we talk about people being free moral agents. They have the right to make their moral choices. Well, ultimately, every one of us, for whatever it is, and if we're all honest, the number one thing that stops us is excuses, because it's easier to blame something else. It's easier for you to say, and how many people out there, and when I hear your story, I can't help but think there are thousands of people right now who have accomplished so little, who have done so little, and we're not devaluing them as a human, not at all. They are valuable as a human, but they have not changed anything about their circumstance, and they're blaming it on the fact, well, I had this tragedy that happened when I was a child. Well, my parent was sick. Well, this happened. Well, that happened. Well, the other thing happened. But there comes a point where we have to say, for whatever it is I'm trying to achieve, I'm going to make these choices. And when I recognize that I have the power to make choices and I have the power to do something about it, and that my choices, and I love what you just said, the choices you have made, good news and bad news. The bad news is the choices you made got you here. The good news is the choices you made got you here. So whether it is a goal that you have of learning a new skill, starting a business, parenting, health goals, whatever we're doing, at the end of the day, all of us have to recognize the number one hindrance from getting there is our excuses and our saying, well, it's not really my choices, or I really didn't need to do this. Whatever it might be. We've got this great big lie that we tell. Not long ago, I had someone, and we were having a conversation, and they said to me, I wish we lived in a world where we didn't lie, where no one could lie. And I looked back at them. I thought about it for a second. I looked back at them and I said, I don't think you're ready for that world. And they said, what do you mean? I said, you're not ready to live in a world where you don't lie to yourself. And they said, what? And I said, the fact of the matter is our biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves. For example, if I'm trying to watch what I eat, I can tell myself a lie about, really it was a difficult day and that's why I did this, or my wife cooked such and stuff. I told Heather, I said, Heather, the number one thing that hinders me from weight loss is you. Obviously joking, but I said, it's you. And she says, what do you mean? And I said, well, you cook good food and then I eat it. And she goes, well, then I cook healthy. I said, yeah, but then when you cook healthy, then I have to go by a drive-through because the healthy food wasn't filling enough. So either way, it's your fault. And so we have this tendency to make things the fault of someone else. We have this tendency to make things dependent upon our circumstances. What we are hearing today, though, when we're talking to Dr. Garmon, and what you're hearing today when you're sitting at home listening, is there comes a point in my life where I have to stop lying to myself, and I have to say that no matter what my circumstance is, no matter what my background is, no matter what my subculture is, I can make choices that can impact. And in all reality, we don't all start at the same spot. We don't all have the same family background. We don't all have the same money. We don't all have the same, generational things in our families. None of us have those things. So we can't sit here and say, we're not going to pretend that everyone's life's the same. In fact, when I'm 8 years old, I have mom. When I'm 10, I've got mom. I still have my mom. I've never had a tragedy like Dr. Garmon had. He's had his things. I've had my things. We both can look and go, well, they don't know. They've never had to go through what I went through. But at the end of the day, all of us are going through different things, but every single human being has the ability to do something in themselves to improve where they are. So as opposed to where we kind of live in a culture now that has spread this idea that I'll just put blame on everything else. I'll keep telling myself this lie. But as long as you're blaming in life on your circumstances, as long as you're blaming it on your opportunity, as long as you're blaming it on anything else, you're never going to see change. And no, we all don't get the same fair shake, but we all do have the ability to make our situation a little better.
Yeah, no, you well said, Patrick. And unless we forget about it, my book, we do call it Lucky Number 8. But then I make the statement very quickly. Read this book and find out if it was luck or something altogether different.
Amen.
And lest we leave people with the assumption that I was lucky, that I'm the anomaly, I believe that God wants things like what happened in my life and what I'm experiencing. He wants that to be the normal. It was not luck. It was God and a number of other things. And in the book, I'll tell them it was church. The church culture helped me. Good Lord. I was pulled out of a dysfunctional culture and planted in a new culture, a more healthy culture where people had ambition, where people tried to live a more healthy lifestyle. I was introduced to new friends. I can't tell you the importance of friendships and having the right kind of friends around you that make you accountable, that keep you accountable, that you admire, that you want to be like. That's what helps you change your habits. If you have a certain goal, and that's another one, goals. What are your goals? If you have a certain goal, then start running and hanging out with people, connect yourself to people who have already met that goal and have experienced similar things to you, but they're down the road ahead of you, and they will challenge you to remain consistent toward meeting that goal. Education. I figured out real quick that the more education I could get, then the better off I was going to be. It was about learning. It was about knowledge. But the formal degrees and certifications I got were just the tip of the iceberg. I have always been a person who chased the rabbits. If I'm reading a book, I'm looking at the footnotes and I'm chasing the rabbits in the footnotes. I want to understand the assumptions and the implications. I didn't get a degree so that someone could call me doctor, so that I could hang a sheepskin on the wall. I got a degree so that I could help Fred, so I could help little Freddie. And that's the honest to God truth. It was the passion, it was the driver within me that I did not want to live that kind of life ever again. I don't ever want to hurt like that. I don't ever want to be poor like that. I don't ever want to raise children like that. I don't ever want to have a family like that. That doesn't mean I'm perfect. A lot of that stuff still has consequences in my life. You could probably talk to my wife and she'd tell you, yeah.
Sure.
But I'm not the man I used to be. I'm 1,000 times better. I probably would be dead. But here's what happens, Patrick. We settle. We reach a point in life where we just settle. The gravity of it, the centrifugal force of the connections, the relationships, the dysfunctions, the pain, we try and we fail and it just becomes too much. And we just quit. This is well enough, status quo, and we just settle, and we settle with a victim mentality. I'm just a victim. It's not going to happen to me. But I'm telling you, with the help of the Lord and the Holy Spirit, and with just it takes persistence, it takes consistency. You can't just do it on January 1 and then on the third week of January, stop. See, here's what happens. We stop right at the tipping point of seeing results. We live in a fast food, fast everything, instant world where if you don't see it in 2 or 3 days, we start working out. And if we don't see changes in 2 or 3 days, we quit. No. It's like planting seed and looking for a harvest. It takes 2 to 3 months of working out seriously before you really start seeing the results. But most people aren't willing to do that. But if you can get, and that's in anything, you go to get an education and all of a sudden you find out what you don't know. You're excited at first, but then all of a sudden I got to pay the money. I got to read the books. I got to write the papers.
Yeah.
I ain't going to do that. Well, you give up too quick. You can do that. And in the process of doing that, you're going to have so many aha moments, so many epiphanies, so many things are going to happen. Your own self-efficacy is good, and self-worth and self-esteem is going to begin to build as you believe in yourself and you realize I can do this. And one triumph leads to another. One victory builds upon another. And then one day, 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, you wake up and you say, wow, look what we did, Lord. Thank you so much. And you can't help but be filled with gratitude.
And something changed, and you talked about it. And so we don't have to, we know for you it's the new birth. But there comes this point where you went from existing to be being a person of hope and a person who set goals.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that I wish that those listening would pick up on, and they would leave this conversation with, we always want it to be more than just a conversation. When they leave this conversation, if they would leave with the idea that stop living your life without a goal, Stop living your life with, I'm just going to get to Friday. I'm just going to get the kids I'm going to get the kids on the bus. I'm just going to get to go to work. I'm just going to get to the next, maybe, okay, you know what? Maybe the next vacation is a decent goal. Maybe it is. But at the end of the day, eventually you got to stop killing yourself in this cycle of, all right, go to work, come home, feed the family, watch some TV, go to bed, get up, do the same thing. And maybe every once in a while we have the goal that if the tax money comes in, we'll go to Myrtle Beach or whatever it is, that it's that hopelessness you feel, that my life doesn't matter feeling that you will feel, that, man, what in the world am I doing? The time is flying and I'm not accomplishing anything. All of those feelings are a direct result of having never set goals, of having never said, this year I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this with the kids, going to do this with the family, whatever it is.
Well, let me say this, and you're right. It's about hope. Hope. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. And I like to say it this way. Hope is the soil from which potential grows. And what happens with the good news, what happens with beginning to trust the Lord and have confidence in Him, is that it gives you hope. And the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ says this: hope is an awakening of the soul, of the human soul, that says life don't have to be this way. That my today can be different from yesterday, and my tomorrow can be even better than today. That is hope. And when you begin to grab hold of that and believe that there is hope for you, that God wants, I know the plans I have for you, saith the Lord, not to harm you or to hurt you, but plans to give you hope and to give you a future. And when you begin to grab a hold of that, and let me just say this to the audience, leave them with two things. Because you've got to start somewhere, and it's the small things. You start somewhere, and in the labs, Patrick, you've heard me say it. We want to change the world. Well, you're never going to change the world if you don't do some little things. And I tell people, start by making your bed. You want to change the world, make your bed. I've made my bed now, even in hotel rooms, for more than 3 decades, every day, not missed a day. I won't do it. I drive some hotel people crazy because they wonder if I actually sleep in the room, but life begins with some small that says, I can make my life better. And when I make my bed every morning, it says, when I get ready to go back to bed, I'm going to have a really nice bed to go back to. And it speaks to my whole attitude about the way that I'm entering the day. I can take care of my car. I can take care of my clothes. I can take care of myself. It's beginning to change those things and make them part of your routine, your habit. And as you begin to change those things, and we want to change these things way out here and reach these long-term big goals without really changing the small things. But the small things, after a while, become routine. They become the way we do things around here. You don't even think about it anymore. You just wake up one morning and, gosh, I've ordered my private world. Wow, look at this. So I would say to people, where do you start? Number one, start by having hope. Believe that life can be better, that you can be better, that you can do this. Secondly, I ask you, what one thing could you do today that if you started doing it would most change your life for the better? And number three, what one thing could you stop doing today? If you stopped it, it would make the biggest difference in your life. Work on those two things. Just start there. Start making your bed every morning. Just start resetting the room after you use it. After you do a meal, clean it up right then, right there. Boom, clean it up right there. You don't have to do it again. You just start. It's a lifestyle. The dishes will never pile up again. The house will never get messy again if you learn to reset the room. Just say that to yourself. When I do something, I'm going to reset the room. I'll put the tools up. I'll put everything back where it's supposed to be. I'm not finished until everything is struck and put away. People in the theater world do this. They have all these great productions and they get out there and they bow and it's over and they get the applause and the curtains close, but nobody gets to go home. Nobody knows that the production's not over until everything has been put away. Then it's finished.
Yeah.
And those are some small secrets that I teach in the LeaderLabs, Patrick, that I've learned, the life hacks, if you will, that have helped me.
Well, folks, we've got some good news. We got some better news, and we got some best news. And the good news is you can take those things today and you can learn from them. You can apply them to your life, and you can watch things begin to change. We've got some better news, and the better news is you can actually sign up for Dr. Garmon's LeaderLab classes. You can sign up for those classes. You can take that. It is an executive leadership course. I have been through the class. I've had staff go through the class. I think it's incredible. And I think it's something that would be an absolute blessing and a benefit to you if you can go through that class. And the thing about it is a class with cost. It is expensive in some ways, but it is an investment. So understand that. So the good news is you've already heard some things today. The better news is you can go to LeaderLabs. And here is the best news. Maybe your life doesn't fit the schedule of being able to go to LeaderLabs and sign up for an executive leadership course. Maybe that's not an investment you're able to make. Maybe you say, you know what, I'm not sure I need to go all in and go through those intensive trainings. And I don't know about that, but I do like what I heard and I'd like to hear more. Well, here's the best news. The best news is Dr. Garmon is going to be releasing content that is based upon his LeaderLabs courses, based upon his life experiences. And this content's going to be absolutely free. First of all, you need to get out, grab the book, Lucky Number 8. And Dr. Garmon is going to let us know where you can follow him on social media, his website info, all those things. You can do that. You can sign up for his executive leadership course, LeaderLabs. The leaders in your life, your pastor, maybe your boss, the business owners, maybe you're in business, maybe you're a manager. You say, I'd love to go through this. Maybe you're on staff at a church. Talk to the leadership in your church. See if you can get sent through the LeaderLabs course. It is well worth it. In the meantime, Dr. Garmon, thank you so much for having joined us today for More Than a Conversation. Man, so many areas we could have really dove into in your story, but we do have a time limit and we want to maintain that. And I do appreciate your time and I want to let you move on with your day. But before you do, can you please tell us where can someone who says, hey, I want to be Garmonized, I need to find out more about Dr. Garmon, I need to find out more about his book, I need to find out more, I want to hear more of these sayings, I need some more of these tips and tidbits. We've got the podcast that's going to be coming out soon. Excited about that. But in the meantime, where can they follow you on social media or on the internet?
Well, you can get more Garmonized and hear more Garmonisms by going to our website, LeaderLabs.com. LeaderLabs, one word, plural, LeaderLabs.com. You can email me at fred@leaderlabs.com, and I'll be glad to respond and have a conversation with you. But much of what you'll see there on our website will give you some advice and some information. We have the 10 essential skills of executive leadership, and you can receive an executive leadership certificate from completing that series of courses. We have LeaderLabs 2.0, another 8-day series that you can receive an advanced certificate in. And then I'm working right now on LeaderLabs 3.0, which is going to specifically deal with particular competencies that people in ministry need from research that I've been doing over the past 2 years. So there's a lot of stuff there, and I'm excited about the podcast. And what you didn't say was that you're going to be my sidekick there, brother. We're going to do this together. And I'm excited as we collaborate together and use the synergy of both of our life experiences and our giftings to try and help people.
Absolutely. And we're excited about that. And listen, guys, here's the thing. One of the things that is so often sought out are people are looking for mentors. They're looking for coaches. Here's the thing. Dr. Garmon is far too busy to be able to coach everyone who would love to be coached by him. And if he wasn't too busy, it would be far too expensive for most of us to hire a coach. But with the podcast that's coming out and all the information that's available, literally, you're going to have access to an executive leadership coach in your life at all times. And so when that content comes out, soak it up. It'll be just like having your own personal leadership coach. It's going to be great. Get over to LeaderLabs, get over to all the social media, shoot over the emails, stay tuned for the podcast. And I know you're going to be blessed by it. And in the meantime, make your bed, set some goals, do one thing that'll move you closer to those goals. Dr. Garmon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you, respect you. It's an honor to have been with you today.
And to everyone else, we hope that today has been more than a conversation for you. Thanks again for being part of More Than a Conversation today. If you'd like more content like this, check out my blog at www.pastorconley.com. That's PastorConley.com. Again, that's PastorConley.com. I'd also love to see you join us in worship at Garden Sanctuary. If you're ever in Rock Hill, South Carolina, or the greater Charlotte area, we'd love to have you stop by and worship with us. Check us out at www.gardensanctuary.org. That's gardensanctuary.org. Until next time, I hope this has been more than a conversation.